Welcome back, Patreon subscribers, to another mini episode, or Underworld short, as we're calling them. This one is about Karkoubi, a drug that has been just decimating Morocco that I had no idea about until a Spanish friend actually tipped me off. There's very few English language sources on this, so I kind of had to piece it together from translations, mostly from like French and Arabic newspapers. But even then, there was only a handful of articles on it. So I'm still a little unclear on some of the stuff, but I thought it was definitely worth an episode. And of course, I'd love to go there and report on it on the ground, but we don't have the budget for that at the moment. So you'll just have to wait until some, enterprising Vice reporter rips us off and goes and does it. Anyway, there's this really famous bit by the comedian Kumal Nanjabi where he kind of talks about this news report about a new drug called cheese. And he describes cheese, he just says the news report describes it as a mixture of heroin and Tylenol PM. And the punchline is basically like, yeah, I really think the heroin is the one doing the heavy lifting. That's mostly just heroin. So like anytime I hear about a new drug, especially one that's a combination of various things, that's usually my first instinct, unless it's something like 2CB. But I've been trying to suss that out with Karkubi, but can't seem to figure out what's what. If any of our listeners have done it or know about it, please send us an email, or, I'll be forced to make Sean do it. Anyway, it also reminds me of, this was a thing maybe 10 or 15 years ago in the early days of the internet and things going around, Jenkum, which was like, I think, sewer rot and feces gathered in a plastic bottle or a plastic container and kind of left to ferment. And apparently there were street kids in Zambia that were inhaling it. And it became this kind of major thing, even though I really don't think there was a ton of proof of it. And it got magnified into this much bigger thing where there was like a panic about it in the States, in like, I don't know, small towns in like northern Florida or Iowa, or how that kind of works. And there were all these news reports. And I really think it was one of those early internet 4chan hoax things, about these kids using it in the States. And there was this panic involved with parents, and it didn't really go anywhere. So that's kind of what I have on my mind again when I hear about stuff like this, just to sort of be skeptical. But this really is a thing that I think is pretty active all over Morocco. And that was my long-winded way of saying that, remains a tad bit skeptical when there's a report of a new drug making the rounds, especially when it has a horrifying reputation, which you're going to learn Karkoubi certainly does. It's referred to as a drug of the poor, and you can get it for about 20 cents a tablet, though they say it can even cost up to €8. And it's all over Morocco, where it's super popular, especially among young people. And dealers are apparently always hanging out around colleges or universities and high schools. Kids as young as 10 or 11 start on it, and it's super, super popular in poor neighborhoods and with street kids. And the articles about it, it sort of reminds me of how Captagon became this all-encompassing thing for the speed methy tablets we talked about in that episode. And it's hard to find a straight answer for exactly what it is. Most articles say it's a combination of psychotropics or benzos like Valium, Rivotril, Xanax, mixed with hash, alcohol, and glue. It's really weird. They describe it as tablets, but it also seems like the kind of thing people would smoke, or maybe people take the pills and combine it with huffing glue or drinking alcohol. I don't know. Maybe it's the Moroccan version of bath salts. And it leads to hallucinations, extreme acts, all sorts of violence as well. Users are said to have psychotic spells, and there's a big Le Monde article that talks about addicts describing themselves as feeling invincible, something they refer to as the Rambo effect. And again, hard to tell what's real or what's not when it comes to this. That's definitely common tropes when it comes to drugs that you hear about. It makes the guy invincible. It's kind of the thing you used to hear about PCP and all that. And again, benzos are pretty gnarly, and especially when people are getting off them. It's just an awful drug all around. According to Paris Match, the drug first starts making waves with the arrest of a serial killer named Dabdalali Amari, who was caught in 2005 after killing 14 people in Rabat, and was said to have been a Karkoubi addict. By 2007, it's said that 80% of young people in prison were there for crimes committed either while addicted to Karkoubi or trying to get Karkoubi. And 3% of the country itself was using it in 2009. Though Paris Match says that the number has surely gone up, both with Karkoubi and variations of it. Here's a quote. "There is the twar from Libya, which makes those who consume it lose all sense of reality. The the timseh, a version of crocodile from Algeria, which leads to the death of users within 2 years. And then the most dangerous of all, al-katila, the killer, a version of Karkubi mixing psychotropic drugs and cannabis, and which leads to extremely violent behavior in those who take it. Various articles in Arab media I found refer to the pills as amphetamines or ecstasy, which is also, kind of confusing. And a Le Monde article quotes a youth organization in the slums of Casablanca that says 40 to 45% of people aged 12 to 35 have tried it. Here's another quote from the Le Monde article. Nicknamed Bola Hamra, meaning red lantern in Moroccan Arabic, or Roche, a name that comes from the Swiss pharmaceutical lab that produces its components. Karkubi has become the country's most common street drug, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. Morocco obviously is where, has a huge hash industry. So if it's more common than hash on the streets, that's pretty outrageous. But yeah, it kind of sounds like how bath salts or Captagon is described in a way. And in that big article from Le Monde, they describe an addict named Hicham who says it makes him feel invincible. The article also opens with a story from a police station where a kid is woken up by the police to discover he had stabbed his mother to death while high on Karkubi. These are like red flags to be skeptical of drug narratives, because that's, come on. That and like jumping off a bridge thinking you're swimming into like a beautiful oasis are like the tried and true tropes you've heard from like, the 40s and 50s about what drugs can do to you. But it is undoubtedly having a drastic effect all over Morocco. It first got popular in Casablanca after being smuggled over the Algerian border. Like I said, Morocco has this big, super big cannabis and hash industry, and the smugglers would go out with hash, and they would come back with Karkuba, a little export-import industry stuff. The Algerian-Moroccan border in general has always been a huge smuggler area, but the normal stuff. Cigarettes, fuel, electronics, stuff, that you try to cheat taxes on. So stopping the flow of pills is really, really hard. Though in 2019, a big joint operation between Spain and Morocco, I guess the drugs are also coming in from Spain, netted a trafficking network in 500,000 pills. It actually kind of reminds me of the story I've heard about Burma's borderlands with India and Bangladesh. And I think I told this in one of the Burma episodes we've done. Indian factories produce like a ton of the generic medications, the painkillers and the benzos and all that. And a lot of those pills are just smuggled across the border into Burma before heading elsewhere. And all these border towns, they're just filled with people who are hooked on all these prescription pills. And it's pretty gnarly. I heard this, obviously I can't confirm it, from an aid worker in Burma years ago. But these areas are super hard to get to, and I never really got a chance to go there. They're also super, super dangerous. Anyway, the Morocco-Algeria border is apparently just as sketchy. This is from a Washington Post article in 2019, quote, "Last week, Moroccan police confiscated over 12 tons of cannabis in the border town of Nadir. Last year, the seizure of over 700 kilograms of cocaine in Algeria triggered high-profile arrests and a public outrage. As dramatic stories of drug trafficking dominate the coverage of smuggling in North Africa, the reality of the region's border economies is increasingly misunderstood." So Karkubi, it really is amazing how much it's blamed for violence, or maybe how much it's causing it. A popular and well-known activist who unfortunately passed away recently, Fatiha Dououdi, sounded the alarm in HuffPost Maghreb, which was apparently a thing, in 2015, saying, quote, "For the past 5 years, we have witnessed a spectacular resurgence of attacks and barbaric crimes. Not a day goes by that we don't hear about young delinquents, often minors, armed with cutlass," which I think is a knife, "spreading panic under the effect of Karkubi." She goes on, quote, "According to practitioners, a person under its effect loses all notion of social and human architecture, and ultimately no longer remembers the tragic act he allegedly committed. He can rape his mother or his sister and kill his father or his brother. He can commit any act of barbarism." There's stories, too, of just whole neighborhoods and rough areas being dominated by Karkubi zombies and all that. It really does remind me of bath salts and the stories we hear about that. And, I'm sorry if this episode isn't really complete. I really want to do more on this, maybe try to get a full episode out of it, but there's just not a lot out there. And I couldn't find a lot more on Karkubi, short of going to Morocco, which, if we get these Patreon dollars up, maybe we'll make it happen. But anyway, again, apologies if this is short. Thank you guys again for supporting us. And we're going to try to do these Underworld shorts mixed in with interviews. Try to get you guys a new bonus episode pretty much every week. We know we've been doing usually like 2 every month or so. But we're going to try to keep this going, and hopefully you guys enjoy them. So take care.